Today is one of my favorite lectures. I hope y'all can hear me good. It's on sexual differentiation, and it's just like it sounds. How are the two sexes different? Now, here's a definition. It's kind of wordy, but it says the process by which, we're going to talk about the process by which today individuals become either male or female and have distinctly different bodies and characteristics. Now, a lot of this, of course, is due to nature, almost all of it. So today we're not going to really focus on nurture. Later lectures, I'll bring that in. But a lot of the first half of the class is really nature heavy. Now, when I talk about biological sex, I talked about this on the first lecture, I think. There's two different influences that come from nature that this lecture is all about. The first influence is going to be chromosomes. I'm going to go off on that for a minute. And the second influence will be hormones, and that will end up the lecture for today. Okay, so here it is. We're going to talk about chromosomes. Your biology teacher's a million times smarter than Tim, but I love talking about it. So when I talk about chromosomes, just a primer or a review for a lot of y'all. A chromosome is a string of DNA, this strand of DNA. That's why I like this picture, because you can see the chromosome right here becoming unraveled all the way down here. Sorry about all that pen action. I'll get all that off of there. Anyway, so we have 23 chromosome pairs. And the 23rd pair is the one that's important for class today, because all the other pairs is like your body type, your structure, your eye color, hair color. But the 23rd pair is the one that makes you male or female. Now we'll talk about all kinds of intersex categories on the next lecture. Now, so your father either contributes an X or a Y. Why? Because men are XYs. They can give one or the other. That's their gamete, right? Gametes, do you remember that term from biology, gamete? Okay. The female gamete, the ova, the egg, she always has an X. So she's always going to give an X, right? So if it's X and X from the father and the mother, then you get a girl, and X and Y, you get a boy. That should be like elementary school shit. Okay, so hopefully that made sense, but this is called a karyotype. So you can see a male, 23 chromosomes right here. You can see how X and Y are different right here, the 23rd pair. And you can see the female has two X's right here because they're real big. Okay, so we'll talk about different combinations like XYY, XXY, X with nothing. So the other day I was listening to Father Rocky go, there's a man and there's a woman. That's how God made it. It's like, well, fuck you, Father Rocky, because like there's not. There's all kinds of other categories, and I'm sorry, it's a disservice to these people. Okay, so here we go. Genotype. Here's your genotype. When I talk about genotype, especially in this class more than any of my other classes, it's your genetic blueprint, your DNA. Most of the time that's expressed in your phenotype. Let's say if you have an XX, you're going to look like a girl. Now there's all kinds of other expression on 1 through 22, right? But it's not always expressed that way, and that's why I love to teach this class. So genotype, what does your DNA say? Phenotype, does it look a certain way? So this leads me into my little genetics lecture, which I didn't do good genetics, but did y'all have to do these Punnett squares? Okay, so my genotype might be 2BB. That's my genotype, 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 genotype. Let's see, this guy has a different genotype, if you can see on here, than dang, this guy, if I can get it to do right. Whoops, my arrow's not doing so good. Okay, but they look the same. They're phenotypically exactly the same. They both look like purple flowers. That's the phenotype. What do you look like? But genotype is what is your DNA. You can't really see that most of the time. Okay, so if you get two recessives, right, you get a white flower. Now, if you look at these things right here, remember you have alleles on them at certain spaces, I guess. Here, and here you'll have different alleles for colors. I don't know that much about genetics, but hopefully this makes sense. You have a certain DNA and it's expressed a certain way. All three of these right here, 1, 2, Three, they have different genotypes, but they look identical phenotypically. Okay, so this leads me to talk about identical twins. Okay, when I talk about identical twins, it's not fraternal twins, right? Where you have two separate, DNAs. Here you have identical genotypes, same exact genotypes. And phenotypically, that's why we call them identical twins, they look pretty similar, but I can notice little differences between this guy and this guy. Just their nostrils, kind of a little bit on their cheekbones. There's a little subtle differences. That's phenotypic variation. I hope I'm making sense. Okay, so genotypically, yes, they're 100% identical. That's why they're called identical. But phenotypically, like I used to know these two twins in high school, Mike and Mark Sylvie. I could kind of tell Mike and Mark apart, even though they're really close. There's subtle variations. That would be their phenotype, in which I could tell them apart. Okay, so that's everything as a primer for genetics. I'm going to come back and use, all this stuff in a little bit. The second influence on the development of our biological sex are hormones. Now, hormones are a part of our endocrine system. If you had me in Intro to Psychology, you should remember something about it, but endo means inside. Hormones get released inside of our body. We also have substances like tears or sweat that come out of our body, but I'm not going to get into our exocrine system. Now, in our endocrine system, these hormones that get released come out of glands, which I'm fixing to talk about the glands, and they target specific organs and tissues. Now, think about testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, things like that, specifically relevant for this class. Now, here are the endocrine glands, and I have this little yin-yang symbol in here for a reason, because I'm big into Taoism, but also this is about homeostasis, balancing. So the endocrine glands do this wonderful job of balancing our body. This is another reason I believe in God. It's amazing. But anyway, let's say your sugar's out of balance. Well, then your pancreas would help to rectify that balance. Unless you're diabetic and have to do it yourself, it's not on autopilot. Okay, so we'll get into all these, but especially get into these two down here because we're in a gender class. But these are the two major players I'm fixing to go into. If you had me for intro, you should remember these two things, the hypothalamus and pituitary. Okay, so the hypothalamus sits right underneath the thalamus. That's what it means, under thalamus. Okay, and the hypothalamus is right here, and I call it the thermostat. Why? Because it's constantly looking for those imbalances within our body that need to come back into homeostasis. Now, the pituitary is right here. It does the work. I call it the conductor. Okay, so the hypothalamus is like an alarm, ding, 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 something is off with the song, and the conductor says, wait a minute, let's hold it, what's going on? Have y'all seen Whiplash? The guy is such a dick. It's like, who's doing it? You know what I mean? Is it the strings? Y'all play. Is it the percussion? Y'all play. Then he doesn't change the whole band, just the part of the band that's kind of effed up. Okay, so if you look at it this way, you have this alarm, the hypothalamus detecting imbalances, and then the pituitary, the conductor, is like going down here to the orchestra, which I call the endocrine glands. I should have had a cute little picture of an orchestra, but I don't know. Sometimes I go too far. And then these guys actually have to get back in line. And then they do their trick by releasing hormones that target various organs and tissues. And then when it comes back into balance, like if I set my thermostat on 72 degrees, once the room hits 72, click, the thermostat clicks again to turn it off. Okay, that's my country-ass view of endocrinology. Now, when I talk about the thermostat right here, actually, from the hypothalamus, I have it right here, there's a lot of little thermostats. It's not just one thing. All kinds of things could be out of balance. So if something's going off right here with reproductive systems, I'm not sitting there trying to balance your water out. You can dig on that. Okay, so I haven't taught this in any other classes, but I love talking about this. It's a little bit sophisticated, but here it goes. Here's our friend, the thermostat. Now, when the thermostat detects something's out of whack, it releases something called a releasing hormone to talk to the pituitary down here. Okay, if you can see this little conductor right here. Okay, and so a releasing hormone in this case, see this one has GnRH. gonadotropic releasing hormone. So this releasing hormone tells the pituitary what part of the band is out of whack. It's the gonads. Okay, so he already knows what to release. He releases the hormones that talk to specific glands throughout our body, and so he knows that these two, sorry I keep saying he, but the pituitary knows that these two guys, LH and FSH, luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone, we'll come back to that later on, they affect gonads. That's all he's got to go to because he knew about this thing up here. I hope you're following my logic right now. So tropic hormones always affect specific glands. Now these specific glands produce specific hormones. That's the easiest. Everybody's heard of these things down here. Almost nobody's probably heard of this, or fewer people of this thing right here. But they're hormones within hormones within hormones that balance back out. And then when your body is detecting a balance again, it's like, hey, I want to stop releasing these. He stops releasing these. They stop releasing these. Okay, I hope I didn't confuse the issue right there. When I talk about these specific hormones, though, that's the easiest one because if you look at men and women, for the most part, men it's testosterone and women it's estrogen or estradiol. But it's not the case that men and women don't make both. It's just the fact that men, make the majority in their body of androgens, and they have a few estrogens that get produced, if I'm making sense. And women produce a lot more estrogens than androgens. And why do we know this? Because only androgens can produce pubic hair and underarm hair, things like this. Well, if women didn't produce androgens, they wouldn't have that stuff. And there's cases of that, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit. Okay, the next part of the lecture is called prenatal development. So focus on this word, pre, and then natal means birth, before you're born. So there's a lot of interesting stuff that goes on in your mother's womb as you develop as a fetus, and we're going to address that in this class. So here we are, the developing fetus. And if I think about this, I wish we were in class because I usually talk about this guy named Vom Saal. And in rats, like the pups line up in the mother's womb all in a row. What does that have to do with anything? Well, sometimes a female will get caught betwixt two males, her brothers, before she's born. And prenatally, there will be all this testosterone that circles around her that's given off by these two brothers, so that when she's born, she becomes more butch. That's pretty fascinating. So we'll come back to this. Okay, so here it is that one sperm made contact with the egg and fertilized the egg out of millions, and that's the miracle that's you. I'm going to talk about the miracle of the developing fetus, and that's what we're going to talk about, but we're specifically going to focus on the reproductive organs. Now, at one point, the tissue of a fetus is called undifferentiated. This is really controversial because that's the tissue that they want to use, for people that have Alzheimer's and stuff like this. It's kind of like Play-Doh. It can go, they call it plastic. It can go either way. And so in the early stages of development, then your tissue is not male or female, regardless if you're XXXY. And so what happens is that if you're a male, I'm going to focus on men for a minute, XY, then at a certain point, those developing cells start to produce testosterone. And this is known as the testosterone wash. And so as that testosterone is produced, just like that rat example, if you're following me, it starts to circle around this developing cell and masculinize those parts of you inside and outside to become the internal and external plumbing for men. But in the absence of this testosterone wash, if you happen to be XX, because you don't produce that, then those cells develop normally as female, and that same tissue, internal and external, become the parts of a woman. So this is where we're going. Okay, so internal plumbing. Sorry I use that term, but internal parts. Lady parts and man parts. You got the blue for the man parts and the pink for the lady parts, right here and right here. Okay, so Mullerian system, they don't give me a pink option, is like the lady system. Okay, and the Wolfian system is the man system, and I just go, a wolf is a boy. That's like totally sexist. I don't know why I think, but that's how I remember. Wolf, boy system. Okay, so Internally, at a certain point, especially right here, I have it marked, 6 weeks in, you have the capability to become a man or a woman. Okay, Father Rocky, come on into class. You know what I mean? And if things go right, just, your XY, you turn out to be a man, XX, you turn out to be a girl, but sometimes things go wrong. And that plasticity goes the wrong way. This is where we're fixing to get cray-cray. Okay, so what happens? 3 months into pregnancy, if you're following me, you have both systems. Okay, but this is when things start to change. Now let me get this off of here. Okay, so if you look at this, if you're XY over here, you're a man, and so you kill off the lady system. See how it's getting killed off? And the blue system comes up, which is the male system. Why? Because you produce the testosterone wash. So the testosterone wash, in conjunction with this thing called the anti-Mullerian hormone, kills off that lady system and brings out the Wolfian system. Okay, so in the opposite state of affairs, if you're XX, you want to kill the wolf because you don't want to be a wolf. That's the male. And so then the Mullerian develops. That's the status quo. The default is to become a female. I don't want to go all Jurassic Park or something on this. Okay, so if I can get all this writing off of here, XXXY can still keep on there, then this tissue right here, testes, is the exact same thing as an ovary. It's like, what? I thought you were just born male or female. It's like, no, the exact same blob of tissue that becomes a man's, for lack of a better term, balls, also becomes like a woman's ovaries up inside of her body. Okay, you know what I mean? This is where we're fixing to go. Now, I have this is from my other book. I don't like it so much, but it is clear a little bit. You see the dark hairy one right here? That's the wolf. And you see the light one, I say, oh, it has a flower on it. It's like, that's the female and it's light. Okay, so anyway, at 3 months in, for men, then the wolf develops. Why? Because of testosterone and anti-Mullerian hormone. The female doesn't produce a testosterone wash, so she develops this way. But what I'm saying is this right here is the same as this right here. And what they refer to this in the literature is homologous structures. We're fixing to get there. So the second thing, we talked about internal parts, but let's talk about external parts. What we really talk about, penis, vagina. Okay, so I like Marilyn Manson, but I'm getting older. I don't know if you know Mechanical Animals, but he has that, Ken and Barbie blob down there where it's not a penis or vagina, it's just a mound of flesh. So that's kind of what you start off with is the Marilyn Manson thing, the Ken and Barbie doll thing. We all have it. I mean, I wish my mom and dad were in lecture right now. It's like they wouldn't believe it. And so now, under the influence of the testosterone wash, what happens? This blob turns into the shaft of the penis, the head of the penis, the balls down here. You're going, what? And if you don't have testosterone, it would default and it would default and it would go to all this stuff down here. But see, the scrotum of a man's ball sack is the same thing as the outer lips, labia majora, of a woman's vagina. What? It's like, I can't believe it. The first time I heard it, I was like, we were hearing their stuff in psychology class. It was satanic. You know what I mean? But that's the way it is. And this is why sexual reassignment surgery is so, I won't say easy, but doable, because it's really outy or inny. You think of it this way, you have the blob right here, and sorry I keep calling it that, but then the blob, like underneath the influence of testosterone, you can see, becomes a penis. Under the lack of it becomes this, but this is this. This is this. This is this. And that's this chart right here. The head of a man's penis, really right underneath it, is the clitoris. And then the foreskin would be the hood, and so on and so forth. See, this becomes this. The shaft of the penis, kind of parts of it, spongy urethra, is the small lips. And the bigger lips, I already mentioned that, is the labia majora, and these are easy to remember too. And so I'm saying that the external part of a woman and the external part of a man are basically made out of the same parts. But this was organized under the influence of the testosterone wash, and so it became an outie. And then the lack of the testosterone wash, you get an innie, And so for the most part, it always works right, but we're going to talk about people when it doesn't. Okay, I hope y'all are still with me. I was getting really tired there for a minute, but this is the last section for today. Puberty. During puberty, you have this additional differentiation that pushes the sexes even further apart. And so this additional differentiation, if I can get my pen on here, has to do with the secondary surge in hormones. For girls, it's estrogens, and for boys, it's androgens. Not completely, though. We produce both things, but for boys, it's a lot more androgens, and for girls, it's a lot more estrogens. Now, what does this do? You don't have to write any of this down, but for boys, your voice gets deeper, you get facial hair, you get underarm hair, all these kinds of things. And for girls, the estrogens drive something different, breast development, rounding of your body, especially around your hips and waist, that softness. Let me see what else. Oh yeah, pubic and underarm hair is on here, but that's a result of androgens. I mentioned that before. But the thing I really want to go into for a minute is menarche, or the menstrual cycle, because boys don't have an analogous process for this thing. When I talk about the menstrual cycle, I'm going to use this little circle over here. I love it. It's very easy to understand. And here's the 5 stages. I love talking about the menstrual cycle. Maybe that makes me a freak, but I love talking about it. Okay, I'm going to argue you already know about 3 of them. At least 2 you should know. Here's the 2. Premenstrual, PMS, right? Before a woman's period, all those little changes that happen. Menstrual, a woman's period. She sheds the inner lining of her uterus each month if she's not pregnant, and that's what bleeding is. Okay, a period. Ovulation, you may know this one, comes from ova. Well, what does that mean? An ova is an egg, and each month the egg is released to be fertilized during this critical window. And I'm a Catholic, so Catholics do the counting method, or they used to a lot. And so it's like, honey, we can have sex here and here, but if we have sex in here, you better be careful. We're going to get pregnant. And we don't want another baby. And so they have to use this, try to project or predict, when that time of the month is. I hope I just made sense there. So what I'm going to argue is these are the 2 that you really have to study for the test. Probably never heard of them. Okay, I didn't, so I'm not going to assume you didn't, but they seem strange. So the ovaries are inside of a lady, and I call that the egg house. Why? Ova. It's an eggery. Okay, so ovary releases an egg each month, and it travels down here. And as it travels down here, it wants to implant in the walls of the uterus. I call it the nest. The uterus is the nest where the baby is raised. And so it wants to implant in those walls because it wants to become impregnated. I'm personifying it. It doesn't really want to, but that's its design. That's what it's for. Okay? So if it is impregnated, it stays in there. And then what happens is your uterus gets thicker and thicker and thicker and thicker, making a nest ready, comfy for that baby. Now, if it's not fertilized, what happens each month, then your body notices like, hey, based on whatever, these levels and everything else, it's not fertilized, egest it, and when it egests it, it sloughs off the inner lining that was the nest with it, and that's what a period is. Okay, so I hope that made sense. Okay, so here it is. Our good friend, the thermostat. Don't let this chart scare you. I love it. You know what I mean? Right here, I'm going to talk about like hormones. Right here is where I'm going to talk about the egg, and you'll see, hormones down here too. Okay, so let me get that off of there. Now, what happens each month is your hypothalamus notices change in your body if you're a lady. And it's like, hey, pituitary, wake up. It's like, I need you to do something. How does it wake the pituitary up? With the GnRH, if you can see that on there. Gonadotropic releasing hormone. Remember the first of the lecture, releasing hormones? I hope so. The pituitary specifically is about the ovaries. So the pituitary says, well, I have some tropic hormones, a lot of tropic hormones, but the specific ones I have for ovaries are FSH or LH. Well, I want to release FSH. Why? Follicular stage. F, follicular. And what does FSH do? It releases an egg from the eggery, the egg house, and it starts to mature it. Okay, so as this egg starts to mature, I hope you're still with me. Let me erase some of this stuff off of here. As it starts to mature, we are still in the follicular stage. It's making a lot of estrogen right here. And as it makes a lot of estrogen, your hypothalamus, your thermostat's going, why is there so much estrogen in your body? Oh, hey, wake up, pituitary. You need to do something again. There's an imbalance. The pituitary says, oh, it's that time. I'm going to release LH. And when I release LH, you see this part right here, along with a little bit of FSH. Sorry, I wasn't talking good right there. When I release both of these, especially the LH, it makes the egg come out. The egg is ripe, it comes out. That's that critical window where you're going, honey, like right in here, we got to be careful because the egg might be present anytime. Now, if you're still on the same page with me, because LH has an L on it, it starts the second stage, or the third stage, I should say, because the second stage was ovulation, right? We just talked about it right here. Stage 3, luteal. Why do they call it luteal? Because see the leftover follicles form into, I'm going to call it a flower right here called the corpus luteum. And that corpus luteum has luteum, luteal, luteinizing hormone, LH. And so what does luteum do? Luteum makes the nest. How does it make the nest? It makes your body produce a lot of progesterone. And see how this shape and this shape are the same? This is the shape of your uterus, how thick it is. And it gets thicker and thicker and thicker down here at the end of the month until it goes, wait a minute, is there really a baby ready in there? And if there's not a bun in the oven right here, so to speak, sorry to use that terminology, progesterone and estrogen drop radically and the inside of your uterus is sloughed off and it resets for the next month. Okay, I hope I did good right there. Now, this is the circle though. I think the circle is easier. Why? Okay. Right here, you have your period. That's easy, right? Period. Menstruation. I should use M on there. For it already has on there, right? So right here is the follicle phase, right? Follicular. Why? Because this is the beginning really of each month where it's like, let's get an egg ready. Why do you want to get an egg ready? Because of ovulation, to let it go. If you let the egg go, then it can get fertilized. And then if it's fertilized, here's the next stage, luteinizing, luteal stage. Why? Because we're making a nest. But see, if we don't need the nest, then we menstruate. And premenstrual is just these few days before here where your body's acting up. That makes it easier. This thing makes it easier. I don't know if I confused the issue, but if you have any questions about this, definitely give me a call. Now people go, well, I'm on the pill. Well, you know what the pill does? If I can get it to draw right, it makes your body constant, and then it goes like this. Why does it look like this? Okay, it makes it constant for 20, let's say 3 days. You take those peachy color pills up there. And then for these, I thought it was 5 days. It's supposed to be 5 days, I thought. For 5 days, you take the white pills. Well, why does the white pills make it like this? Well, the white pills is a sugar pill, so there's no estradiol. Those other ones all have estrogen in them, and these don't. So now your body goes, oh my God, I don't have any estrogen right here. It must mean that I'm not pregnant. Bam! It makes your body have a pseudo period in a way. It's like, okay, get rid of it. And so that way you're not going to ever get pregnant. And so you always flush the system, you always reset it, and then you always keep it constant with those peach color pills. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Now, if it doesn't, I'm not going to ask you that part on the test. But to recap, I think I have this on here. Here it is. I love this picture. Because see right here, we have our good friend the hypothalamus. Release a releasing hormone right here. Release the hounds, right? Pituitary. Well, what can I do? Oh, FSH makes the follicles, see the follicles right here, develop the egg. I kind of did it backwards, right? It goes develop the egg that's right here. As the egg is developed right over here, eventually your body creates a lot of estrogen and the hypothalamus goes, dang, there's a lot of estrogen. Hey, pituitary, wake up again. And what does the pituitary do this time? I'll get a different color. Luteinizing hormone. Why? Because I want you to pop the egg out of here and this corpus luteum is going to start making this progesterone so it makes the nest over here as the egg is traveling all the way down here and going through mitosis. and it will be implanted as a blastocyst inside the uterus and grow in that nest. I love it. I don't know. Hopefully I did a good job, but I'll see you next time.